My name is Andrea Pennington. I'm an integrative physician, acupuncturist, best-selling author, and international speaker. My career in broadcast and digital media spans over 20 years. As past medical director for Discovery Health Channel, I've had multiple appearances on Oprah, Dr. Oz, and CNN, and my TED Talks have reached 2.5 million people. For the last several years, I've been helping other doctors, dentists, healers, and coaches from around the world to share their messages with global audiences through personal branding, publishing, online courses, and media training. And what makes this combination unique is that I am bringing my 20 years of expertise as a professional speaker and coaching other people on their TED-style talks. So I know what it takes to craft a keynote, a TED Talk, and even workshop presentations so that you communicate your message with confidence and clarity. Hello, beautiful soul. How are you doing on this Thursday? I pray that you are doing well. Welcome to our third masterclass in this series on building resilience, overcoming childhood trauma, and holistic healing. Very lovely to see Sandra D is already in the house. Feel free to type in the chat whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you are watching on the replay, welcome. Just drop me a hashtag replay in the comments to let me know. So excited to be with you yet again. I thank you for those of you who have sent in comments and questions and support for these masterclasses. I'm very, very happy to know that this has been helpful for you. Just putting things into perspective about how healing, trauma, and all of that works together, that is my jam, that is my mission, and I love doing it. So I'm very, very happy to be back here with you yet again for another live masterclass. And today, what we're going to be talking about are what I call the 10 villains of negativity who hijack your brain to keep you stressed and depressed, and how you can beat them and build up resilience. See, for many years, I actually struggled with depression and anxiety. And despite being highly functional and successful in my career, I was secretly battling with villains of negativity. Yes, it's true. There were several miserable mind states that frequently robbed me of peace and happiness. I had this persistent feeling of not being good enough. I had anxious feelings of unrest, and there were these low moods that I just never quite got to feel satisfaction from my accomplishments or with life in general. And I knew that I had this feeling that something was missing, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what would make me happier. And I've shared in a TEDx that I did in Monte Carlo that the anxiety and the low moods that I experienced affected my professional and my personal life. And I was really desperate for relief. And I saw a therapist who told me that I needed to become more resilient in order to beat these villains of negativity that roam around in my head. And to do so, he said, I needed to be fat, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant. Now, these are a few of the key ingredients in this soup of resilience. Now, I have since learned that resilience is the key to weathering the storms of life, as well as dealing with our own flaws and shortcomings. And the real key to remaining productive and happy in the face of life's challenges is to develop a stress-resistant personality. And you can do it. You can become a master of your brain to help you build resilience that ensures that you will bounce back faster and stronger after stressful events. Sounds good, right? Well, the research says that resilience, this state of being, can even promise us a speedy recovery after an illness or some sort of setback. And a lot of us are in need of that right now. Now, my experience is a little bit different. I'm an integrative physician, always looking holistically. And, excuse me, my experience with the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, mindfulness, meditation, neuroscience, and positive psychology, all of that has shown me that we truly can become the master of our own energy and healing. We can adapt to stress without letting it take us down, and end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. We can achieve more success in our careers and even enjoy greater harmony in our relationships. So this integrative and holistic approach to wellness that I use has allowed me to guide my patients towards self-healing in many cases and accelerated recovery using conventional therapies in others. So building up resilience has actually become a cornerstone of my medical practice and psychological coaching for the last 20 years. So through my professional connection to other doctors and therapists and healers around the world, I've now been exposed to even more cases of people who have put these traits to work that have helped them recover from burnout, from stress-induced illness, and even techniques that have helped them overcome the lasting physical and emotional effects of exposure to toxic or traumatic experiences in childhood. So you'll read about them in several of my books. Now, while all of the resilience research is quite extensive, most people actually are unaware of the real-world applications of the clinical data. And so I am happy to report that the true stories presented in my books, including the top 10 traits of highly resilient people, these stories represent authentic examples of how resilience is built, reinforced, and relied upon in real life. So today I'm going to share with you my research findings, along with some actionable little exercises you can implement on your own so that you can start to experience more resilience. Does that sound good? Wonderful. All right, so I see we've got Vegas, Oregon, and John. What's up, Jay Swift? Don't know where you are today, but we've also got Levon in Philadelphia. I'm loving it. So welcome. So let me just give you a little overview of what we'll be covering in today's masterclass. We're going to talk about the top tips to build resilience. That's what you signed up for. That is what you're getting. What I'm going to explain is that we have our own innate, an inborn vitality code. You'll see what that means in a moment. I'm going to define what resilience is and what it is not. Some people do get confused. And then I'm going to go deeper into these villains of negativity that I experienced and that many of my clients experience. Because sometimes it's easier to pick out the things that we want to change besides the things that we really want to go after. So even though resilience is this lofty goal, it's sometimes easier to look at what holds us up, what gets in the way. And finally, we're also going to look at the specific tips to build up these 10 traits of resilience that will lead to a stress-resistant personality. Does that sound good? All right. So very happy to have you all here. All of this is based on the research in this lovely book, The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People, which we just published last year. It became a bestseller. We didn't know that the pandemic was about to hit, but heavens, were we seriously prepared. You can watch several of the interviews with authors from that book on my YouTube channel. All right, so let's start to actually define resilience, because resilience really is defined as an individual's ability to adapt in the face of adverse conditions. If we look at this in ecological terms, resilience is also considered to be the ability of an ecosystem to recover after some sort of perturbation. If we looked at groups or organizations, resilience is the ability of a system to withstand change in its environment and still function. So resilience is a hot topic right now because of the pandemic. We're seeing it within ourselves, the need for it within relationships, and of course, with work, right? Now, ultimately, a resilient person is often referred to as being able to bounce back after a tragedy, illness, injury, or the ability to recover after a setback. So being resilient usually brings to mind things like being flexible, adaptable, durable, or of strong moral character. Now, resilience is actually an inborn capacity. We are each born with an internal program for resilience. So this is important for you to know because no matter the challenges that you face in life, you have an inborn capacity to adapt to and recover from life's setbacks. And that includes illnesses, injuries, accidents, and pandemics. Each of us is born with the inherent potential to live a meaningful, happy, and healthy life, even in the face of serious adversity. And we do have this innate vitality code that directs the body to recover from stress and illness. Now, for most of us, unless there was some significant birth trauma or a problematic pregnancy or an inborn genetic disorder, each of us was born in a state of well-being. All of our organ systems are poised for a healthy life when we're born, full of the ability to weather the various storms of life with resilience and with grace. So we're born with this natural tendency to thrive, and this is a lifelong tendency. So just as children bounce back after sickness and illness and surgeries, we too have that ability. We adults still have that ability. In the Western world, we call it homeostasis, and that is the ability to recover. Now, because we have this inborn capacity, that means that you can also tune into it, tap into it, reactivate your innate vitality code so that you can recover from the stress of the pandemic, illness, injury, or disease. So you got that? We are programmed for resilience. Now, I'm really grateful because my mother is the one who introduced me to traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture while I was still in medical school. And I was really inspired by the beauty and the elegance of the Chinese medical philosophy, which points out how each of us can actually enjoy ageless vitality and optimal well-being throughout our lifespan. And it's about optimizing our life to return to harmony in our energy system. And according to traditional Chinese medicine, we can renew our vitality, return to this state of wholeness and wellness when we live in accordance with our true nature and the flow of nature around us. In other words, our own natural forces can bring us back to wellness and wholeness and set us on course for optimal well-being and even the pursuit of your highest dreams and ideals. So this is really what resilience is all about. And the Chinese have documented this for thousands of years. And now it's the time for you to master it as well. So to get a sense of how the Chinese medical influence is on you, I highly recommend that you take the vitality test. If you go to thevitalitytest.com, you can take this free questionnaire. It was developed by Nick Haynes, a very dear friend and colleague, founder of the 5 Institute. This online questionnaire will help you identify which of the 5 elements are your dominant influences. So whether that's water, wood, metal, earth, or fire, take the vitality test to learn more about what makes you naturally brilliant and what may make you a little vulnerable to stress. And it's going to show you how these 5 elements can actually help you in building resilience. So that's just your first little tip and trick. So if we're born with this natural capacity for resilience, to bounce back and thrive, it's important for us to think through how it is that we end up depleting our capability to recover, right? So while each of us are born with this inherent capacity of resilience, we can actually overwhelm the system with all of the drama, trauma, and stress in our lives. In fact, if we have prolonged exposure to stressful situations and we don't have adequate resources for coping, or we manage and try to diffuse the physiological stress response with unhealthy coping strategies, we can actually impair and overwhelm the body's ability to recover. And that is what can lead to these considerable damages that we see in multiple organ systems when we are overworked in our body, overloaded in our schedule, and overwhelmed in our minds. It uses up vital energy and can leave us feeling exhausted and fatigued. And when this happens, that is when we experience dis-ease in a variety of forms. So we may become sick or tired or depressed or literally devoid of joy and passion in life. So to cope, I know that some people will lean on drugs, alcohol, shopping, food, sex, media consumption, and all of that is just an attempt to numb out. Now, my career started off in the world of addiction recovery, so I know that these are just coping mechanisms to deal with the psychic pain that we may have experienced. But unfortunately, these coping mechanisms can, rather than calm down the body, which actually works in the short term, but they can be counterproductive, particularly if you, one, don't face whatever was stressing you out, and you end up perpetuating disease, dysfunction, and inflammation throughout your body. So the thing that we have to be mindful of, besides all of the overworking and the over stuff in the external world, if we really want to build resilience, we also have to look at our internal world. Because as I mentioned, there are these negative mental states that actually hijack the brain. So our brain normally has this rest and recovery system in place. But these villains of negativity, as I call them, they actually perpetuate the stress response. They perpetuate chaos, robbing us of vitality and making some of us feel vulnerable and helpless. And it's these villains that actually push us into a reactive neurological state, which means that we're being reactors instead of actors. And it means that we're perpetuating stress, hijacking the brain's rest and recovery mechanisms. And what you could really look at these villains as is they are the flip side, or they are the dark side of our top resilience traits. So what am I talking about here? Well, when we start to look at these villains of negativity, the first one is lack of awareness. Now, this one is an interesting one, right? Because if you really think about it, lack of awareness or lack of insight means ignorance. And I know some people feel like that is a diss. And I'm not trying to diss anybody. What I'm saying is that a lack of self-awareness means that you're just not even aware of what's triggering you. So as I go through this list of some of these villains of negativity, I want you to see how many of these are, your kind of entourage. How many of these homies are hanging around with you? Because if you have them, they are the ones that could likely tip you into post-traumatic stress disorder or accelerated aging or losing your libido or all of the other eating disorders and addictions that we talk about. Now, luckily, we can beat these villains of negativity, and that's what today's masterclass is going to do. It's going to teach you how to strengthen your capacities, all right? Make sense so far? I'm looking for comments. It sounds like we are in a good place. Okay, so when we look at this lack of awareness, the good news is you will soon be able to take a quiz. Our new resilience quiz will point out which of these 10 villains or 10 traits you're low on so that you can successfully build up on them. Sound good? Wonderful. So please do let me know if you have any questions. But first off, all right, so how do we beat ignorance and tune into insight and self-awareness? Well, the first thing I mentioned is the vitality test, finding out which of the 5 elements influences you. And the report that you get from the vitality test will really shed some good light on this. Now, the other thing is to just become aware of what makes you tick. So if you think about the absence of awareness as ignorance, it means not stupidity, it just means you're not aware. So if you find yourself always getting into similar situations, you might need to just take a step back and say, what am I missing here? What can I open up my vision to? Because we have to be aware of what our mental and emotional makeup is. This comes into the term of emotional intelligence. What do you really need in order to thrive? Are you aware of it? Now, I know many of us know we need to do more rest and take more breaks and have more fun or play or meditation, and yet we don't do it. But maybe you don't even know what it takes to thrive. That's what we're talking about with this villain of a lack of awareness. If you don't know what you need in order to thrive, then you are more likely to suffer more or feel helpless in the face of challenges. And this is really overcome by developing emotional intelligence or insight. Insight into where your feelings come from, being curious and open, willing to investigate them. I found it incredibly helpful to look at the ancient Chinese and Taoist concepts of the 5 elements, because I was giving myself a hard time for not knowing that I don't have to fit in like everyone else. I was trying to fit myself into a box, not honoring or being aware of what I needed to thrive. I happen to be on this 5 elements thing. I happen to be high in wood energy and water. And these elements really drive a lot of what I'm into, what I will tolerate, and what I won't tolerate. And with that lack of awareness, I was judging myself harshly, which we'll also talk about judgmentalism momentarily, because it's one of the other negative villains that can rob you of your natural resilience. Make sense? Great. I'm glad to see that this is helping. So once you get your test results from the vitality test, start to make a list of your stress triggers. Make a list of the things that you know are going to set you off. You know what they are. Whether it's traffic, maybe it's being hungry, maybe it's being tired, maybe it's having too much mess around you. Whatever those stress triggers are, make a list of them. And then make a list of 3 ways that you will cope or avoid or prevent those things from happening. Since part of what makes us feel stressed is the false belief that we're not capable. Like anyone else out there feel like, oh my God, I just can't even. But if we would actually stop and do a little bit of prevention, we would find that we are capable of dealing with the situation. And so it's best to choose a few coping mechanisms so that you already feel ready to face a challenge. For me, sometimes it's just as simple as meditation. If I get into a stress state, I know that I can just take 10 minutes, do a little yoga nidra meditation, and that hits the reset button for me. So what is it for you? Make a list of 3 to 5 things that you know, if you're faced with the next stressful situation, these will help you out. Does that make sense? All right. So our second villain of negativity is this guy. It's being rigid and attached and inflexible. If you're too attached to one way of life, you run the risk of snapping and breaking. And so that villain is associated with anger, frustration. If we look at it from the Chinese perspective, we would also see things like liver problems, tension in the muscles, that locked jaw. That's one of those villains of negativity that will rob you of your resilience. The third villain you might know of is anxiety. Whoops, that went a little fast. So I'm going to go through these in depth. So anxiety, pessimism, worry, and doubt. Are you someone who sits there and stews over things in your mind, or you ruminate on things and it causes you to maybe have upset stomach, or you start to snack? Those are what I call villains of negativity, things that you need to be looking out for. Having low self-confidence is actually one of the villains that will rob you of your natural resilience. And I'm going to tell you some steps on how to overcome that as well. Do you have negative self-talk? Do you have a judgmental voice inside of you? I did. I always say I had these 13 Supreme Court justices in my head critiquing everything. Negative self-talk not only is a thing that will prevent you from bouncing back, it actually can impact your health. So it's really important that we investigate this. And if you have it, I'm going to show you some ways that you can get out of that. And of course, they are all outlined in the book. The next one is isolation. When you are stressed, when you're under pressure, when you're feeling like you might break down, do you reach out to people or do you go into isolation? That happens to be one of the traits of people who are not resilient. They will break. So you should be aware of that one. The next one up is sadness. Negative emotion. If you regularly are stuck in loops of negative emotion, that will rob you of your natural ability to bounce back. And the last one is a lack of purpose, not feeling like you have meaning in your life. These are, all of these traits are the flip side or the dark side of the resilience traits. So number one, if we wanted to overcome ignorance, what we want to do is to develop insight and awareness. And I've already given you some tips about that. I highly recommend that you practice meditation. I have several free meditations on my website, andreapennington.com, where you can download them. You can also get them on the Insight Timer app. For those of you who feel like you don't like to meditate, doing guided meditations where you don't have to be the one trying to focus on your breath or trying to quiet your mind, but if you can start getting in the practice of listening to guided meditations, they will help impact your brainwave state, where you will learn how to quiet and calm your body and your brain. And this is particularly useful for people with complex PTSD who get into emotional overload or flashbacks or find that their emotions are just overwhelming. And so the meditations that I recommend and that I have online will do that for you. I've also recently, over the last couple of years, I've been using a new brainwave technology that I will be sharing in one of my upcoming blog posts that will, with binaural beats and special 3-time pure tone technology, it actually helps to get you in certain brainwave states. And I know some of you already know that I'm a super nerd when it comes to brainwave states. So how do we overcome rigidity and attachment and become more flexible and adaptable? Like, this was the big one for me because I have a lot of wood energy. And wood energy, I mean, if you think of an oak tree that stands mighty and strong, yes, we have all these leaves of forward-thinking, momentous energy. But when we are rigid and inflexible, we run the risk of snapping. So this was the biggest lesson for me in my resilience journey. I knew that being rigidly attached to plans and goals and desires sets me up for disappointment, and it has given me this tendency to lash out at other people. So, 15 years ago when I was just experiencing all of this, it was really hard because when things don't go our way, it's easy for us to break down and collapse. But it's our own resistance to what life is giving us that leads us down that path. So if we develop the capacity to bend, to give and take, we can not only survive the storm and have a chance to move forward again, we might actually spring forward. And it's true, sometimes we do need to take a step up and act. Other times we need to know when it's time to step back and recharge. And so my question for you is, how do you recharge? After you've had maybe an angry outburst or a stressful event, what do? If you think about your coping mechanisms, are they helpful or harmful? I know you know them. All the things that we do to numb out. Now, I'm not judging you because I know how it can be so incredibly uncomfortable when the nervous system is tweaked. But what are your coping mechanisms? Hey, Jay Swift. Yes, John, I do yoga. That's one of the things that I've done to increase my flexibility of my body, but also of my mind. Doing yoga, qigong, meditation, breath work, journaling. These are the things that have helped me become much more adaptable in life. So these are the things I want you to be thinking of. In order for us to counteract and beat the villain of rigidity and reduce resistance to become more flexible, it's important to know that this isn't the same of just, this is not the same thing as just giving up. Okay, this is about being wise to what the environment is giving you. So sometimes it's helpful just to try different perspectives when we're going down a certain path. And by being willing to open yourself up to consider alternatives, you can actually reduce the tension that locks you into these negative stress states, which typically further block us. Like, have you ever been in a situation where you needed a creative result, but you couldn't get it because you were so frustrated and locked on? So think about it. Just think about if you have a past problem, or is there something that you've overcome that did not go according to your plan, but it actually turned out positive anyway. So yes, it's true you may have preferred that things go in a certain direction, but can you see that the resolution to your problem could also come from multiple angles? Just really be willing to have a look at your life and see if you can find at least one example to prove to that inner villain that not everything has to be your way. And yes, I love this. Prayer is a wonderful example of what we can do to maintain our flexibility. Now, I also want you to examine a past situation where you did force things or coerced things, the situation, to get your way. Now, looking back, can you see that there could have been alternate solutions that would have been just fine and likely with a lot less drama that you could have taken and worked out? So the exercise is to look back on your life on a situation that you wanted it to go one way, it turned out another way, and now you can realize, oh, there were multiple ways to solve that problem. And then look at an alternate situation in your past where you were trying to force something, and now looking back, you realize that you could have eased up. So write down at least one example for each of those, all right? Now, how do we let go of attachment and welcome adaptability? So being adaptable, what I typically think of it as, sorry guys, I'm losing my flow here. I think of it as going with the flow. And by going with the flow, I've said it before, just being open to accepting that chaos and change are a part of life. And once you can accept that, that can help you decrease your chances of becoming overwhelmed by becoming angry or disappointed. So if you find that you need more resilience, recognize that being adaptable is a key resilience trait, and it's one that gets better with practice. So some people are afraid that they're going to be considered a pushover or a doormat to be walked over. And most people actually find that others have a positive response to you being flexible. And they find that flexible people appear more wise and mature. So I know it's tempting to try to stay rigid and force your way so that people won't run over you. But the research actually shows that the opposite is possible. Make sense? All right, so think about maybe a time in your life when you did have a flexible attitude. Can you see how that may have impacted your mood and your energy and the other people involved? If you can, write down at least one example where a flexible attitude created more peace and more harmony for everyone in that situation. So, next up is this trait of persistence. Now, many times we can get into a state of feeling like, I just want to give up, right? And if you're in that state of panic or freeze, we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, and appease, or fawn. For some people, when they are worked up and anxious, they freeze and they give up. But the flip side of that is developing persistence. And that is being willing to keep moving, to keep going forward. Obviously, we balance that with knowing when we need to get out of a situation or not. But that's what we're talking about. Make sense? So persistence is one of those psychological traits that is shown in all of the studies, whether you consider that to be grit or hardiness. Persistence is a top resilience trait. And thank you, Shireen, for for your kind words about my 21-day compassion meditation. It is wonderful, and it does help us. Thank you for that. All right, so moving on, our next one is tolerance and compassion. So this is to counteract that tendency to be very judgmental and critical, either of yourself or of other people. Now, there have been so many wonderful compassion researchers in the last decade that many people are hearing about how compassion is so powerful. And that 21-day compassion meditation series will help you develop this inborn capacity. We're all born with a compassion gene. It's true that some of us got circuits in our brain that are more developed in compassion based on the childhood upbringing we had. So I mentioned in our positive childhood experience masterclass last week that when a baby is attended to regularly and the parents make eye contact and coo and connect with the child, and they are responsive when the baby needs feeding or changing or comfort or a temperature change, then we see that these areas of the brain that are tied to self-soothing and compassion get developed. Conversely, if you grew up in a home where neglect or abuse happened, then you may not have these compassion circuits as readily developed, but you can develop them. And compassion is one of the top traits of resilience. It helps us recover because it changes. One of the next things we'll talk about is that internal dialogue. And it helps us recognize that we're all human. We're all on this journey and we're all making mistakes. And so with more compassion on board, it allows you to be willing to recognize your faults and to give other people a pass as well. And that gives you a greater ability to get out of the stress response and actually heal and recover. It's why we say holding on to a grudge can actually create illness in the body. And if you think of it from the Chinese medicine perspective, that energy is meant to move. And anytime we block energy in the body, it is going to have some sort of an outburst, whether that's physical or emotional. And so by practicing the compassion meditation, also called loving kindness meditation or metta, you can find my version on my website or on Insight Timer. There's a self-compassion meditation that you can take, and it's really, really helpful. It's what saved me from caregiver fatigue when I was taking care of my mom, and that compassion meditation is what saved me from burnout when I became a single mom 15 years ago. It really saved my life because I had gone from being this overachiever, type A, aggressive, rigid person to all of a sudden my whole life was about feeding the baby, changing the baby, rocking the baby. The baby wouldn't sleep. Happy birthday, Sienna. She just turned 15 yesterday. So, compassion, big one. Now we want to rise above pessimism by turning on optimism. When we are overcome with doubt, it's easy to imagine that the world is against us. And so to rise above pessimism, we have to learn to adopt a more hopeful perspective. And though you may feel like you were kind of a half-empty kind of person, studies show that optimism can be learned. Remaining open and hopeful that a better tomorrow may come increases your chances of living longer without disease, including heart disease and cancer. And optimism also makes you more fun to be around. So just think back to a time when you expected the worst and maybe you were actually pleasantly surprised that things turned out well. Can you come up with at least one example of that? It's really, really important because if we only look at what is in front of us and the chaos of our world, it's very easy for us to become pessimistic. So use the power of memory to look back in your life. Make sense? Excellent. So we want to conquer that worry and anxiety and instead create calm confidence. So anxiety and worry are often accompanied by chaotic thinking and unhealthy compensation methods. And the body's many manifestations of anxiety could include shakiness, upset stomach, insomnia, low mood. And so learning how to create calm for yourself can open up your mind to new insights and the ability to problem solve effectively. So developing the skill of focused concentration can help you block out negative self-talk, which is coming up. It can also help you bring harmony to your body and brain. So you can learn to create calm confidence by practicing deep breathing, practicing yoga, and practicing meditation. Being out in nature, listening to music, and connecting to other people can also help. And studies show that when we practice meditation regularly, whether we're focusing on the breath or a mantra or there's some object that we're focused on, that can help dissipate this anxious energy. So again, you can access several of my guided meditations for free on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. They're there as well, and they're on the Insight Timer. So once you've brought some calm to your body and your brain, breathing 21 times or visualizing the outcome to your dilemma. Now, there's two ways to do this. Tuning into optimism to bring more confidence, especially after a meditation. You can visualize a positive outcome. So as we are emerging from this pandemic, many countries are opening up. Can you imagine an optimistic or positive future? So I have a Future You meditation on Insight Timer. Listen to that and see if you can imagine yourself coming out stronger and happier and healthier. That can help boost your confidence. Another way to boost your confidence, though, is to imagine the worst. Imagine the worst case scenario, but see yourself going through it with ease and grace, overcoming whatever obstacles that you could anticipate. So you allow this optimistic version to come to mind, even if it seems unlikely, because you're opening your mind to a positive possibility. And then that can train you to start to let go of the automatic anxiety that drains you and attracts bad things to you. And again, if you can't think for the best, think of the worst. Get calm, do some breathing, do a short meditation, and then allow yourself to imagine the worst possible scenario, but bring to mind what could go wrong and imagine yourself handling every tough part with grace. You can think of it as, what is the best version of you and how would you confidently work through those problems? So if you can, list at least 3 ways that you can handle any of the negative situations and bring about that positive outcome while maintaining your cool. Studies show that if you imagine how you would successfully handle the worst case scenario, it can actually increase your confidence and reduce anxiety. So you don't want to just imagine the worst case scenario leading to failure. You imagine yourself handling it with a positive way and a positive outcome. So next up, we want to knock out negative self-talk and release your inner cheerleader. Now, I've explained this for me, that the negative voice in my head was like a nasty little gremlin that can really rob us of confidence. So we have to learn to identify, challenge, and disprove the negative thoughts, and then replace the voice in the head with a positive, supportive, and compassionate voice. So for me, there are 5 ways that I regularly do this to overcome the negativity, and that is to flip the script on that internal conversation so that you can set yourself up to become more resilient. So the first way that we do that is to become aware of the script going on in the background of your life. So what kind of phrases do you hear most often rumbling around in your mind? Do you engage in any name calling, like calling yourself an idiot or a dummy, or insert whatever other word you might say? And what is the tone of voice in your head? Is it nasty and mean and snarky? So first we want to become aware of what that background voice is, how it sounds and what it says. Next, we want to question and challenge the voices. I go into this extensively in my book, The Real Self-Love Handbook, but one of the things you can do first is just ask yourself, is it true? So whatever that voice is saying, like, oh, you always screw things up, or you're such an idiot, and you'll never get it right. Is it true? Ask yourself that, and then be honest with yourself. And even if it is, the third step is to disprove that inner commentary and expose the lies by finding evidence to the contrary. So for example, if you happen to hear an inner voice saying, ugh, I always mess up, then look for evidence in your life where you did not mess up. It can be as basic as, I made a meal, or I washed the car, or I made the bed. That is proof that you do not always mess up. A lot of this is very basic, but you'd be surprised at how much it works. And then the fourth step in improving your self-talk is to replace the lies that your inner critic says with the truth. Remind yourself that you are competent, you're smart, you're helpful, and you're worthy of success. I recommend you create a personal success mantra or a positive affirmation that is true about you. And you can find that there's a 3-step process to coming up with your own personal success mantra. Find that on andreapennington.com. And then the fifth and final thing that we can do with flipping the script on negative self-talk is to go out and prove your case. Like, use your talents and abilities to show that inner critic that, yes, I am capable, right? You're not showing the rest of the world, because that's what leads many of us into people-pleasing and overwork and burnout. You're showing your own inner critic that you are capable, right? So I'm glad that some of this is sinking in and helping you. I'm going to do my best to leave time for questions. So the next thing is to avoid isolation. So you saw the guy hiding out in the bed. We avoid isolation by staying connected to positive people. This is the number 8 resilience tip. If you want to have a stress-resistant personality, this is what you do. It can be tempting to withdraw from the world when we're stressed, when we feel like we're beat down, but prolonged isolation can actually keep us stuck in negativity. So if you're someone who likes to be alone when you're stressed, like me, just know that over time you actually reduce the likelihood of bouncing back. Resilient people lean on and lean into positive relationships. So during the stressful times of your life, I suggest resist the temptation to withdraw into a cave. All right? Instead, give yourself permission or even a prescription to connect with positive people, at least once a week, if not more. You can hang out with us in the Real Self-Love movement. We spread positivity around the world on the second Tuesday of the month, and there's new opportunities coming soon. Now, of course, we're talking about connections with positive people. You don't want to waste your time, but staying connected either to discuss your problems or to at least get a break from your own drama can help. So when you can connect with people who are uplifting and supportive of you, you have a greater likelihood of being able to bounce back faster. So make a list right now. Do you have 3 people that you could count on for either an uplifting conversation or non-judgmental support? Studies show that people who don't even have one person on their list of people they could call in time of need, they have bad health outcomes and higher risk of suicide. So this is a real one. This is a real resilience booster. The next one is to beat the blues by deliberately increasing positive emotions. So we're not just talking about slap happiness, but we're talking about joy, gratitude, amusement, and awe. They've all been proven to help us build resources that allow us to deal with life's many challenges, and they buffer against the negative emotional experiences. Now, most studies conclude that the daily practice of writing in a journal about 3 things that went right in your day can actually help you create more gratitude and more happiness. So how do you do that? One of the things I like to do is watching inspiring TED Talks, things that remind me that my problems are small and that there are many ways to overcome the blues. Some people like sharing baby animal videos on Instagram and TikTok and whatever, or people doing amazing, funny, or heroic things. These days, TikTok, yeah, it's actually one of the things on my list. Or comedy films, or reading a joke a day. There are these websites that have like a joke every day, and these are things that are going to help you increase your happy hormones like serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Hugging someone for at least 10 seconds can also provide a feeling of comfort, safety, and connection, and it gives you that brain boost of oxytocin to help you stay upbeat. One of my Favorite mood boosters comes from this. It is called a smiler. It's an instrument of joy created by a beautiful Icelandic artist named Gegga. And she heard this quote, "If you smile 5 times a day for no reason, you can change your life in 90 days." This is a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh that inspired Gegga to create this. She calls it a helper. It's a magical instrument of joy that when you put it in your mouth, it forces you to smile. So you can watch an inspiring video of Gegga sharing how she used laughter and gratitude to heal from a really dramatic facial injury. It is worth checking out. If you've not seen me talk about it, when you see the before and after photos, it's worth it. So, what are 3 things that you could be grateful for in your life? What are 3 ways that you could experience more positive emotion daily? Daily. The great work of Barbara Fredrickson and her broaden and build theory has shown that every micro moment of positivity can build up psychological capital or resilience. It makes us more resourceful. So don't think that this is fluff. There's actually clinical data out there. Don't you just love it? And then our 10th resilience trait is having purpose and meaning in life. And there's a cute little cartoon of Gegga. So if you wanted to get rid of that feeling of being aimless, find meaning in life. Why do you get up in the morning? What is it that gives your life meaning? Do you feel a sense of purpose in what you're doing? Having a purpose to live for, or what the Japanese call ikigai, has been clinically shown to correlate with less stress-related disease and a longer life. This is real. It's not just in Japan. The great work of Carol Riff in the MIDAS study, that's the midlife US study, she's compared different countries, but looking at middle-aged people in the United States, if they answered the questionnaire and say that they felt that they had some sort of purpose or meaning in their life, and that could be feeling like you're connected to something bigger than just you. That could be on a community level, that could be on a God or universal level, or the earth. You could be connected to a cause, which could be social, political, or it could be taking care of grandbabies or kids. But having a sense that your life has meaning can actually prolong your life and help you weather the storms of life and be more resilient. And part of the reason that purpose is helpful is that it causes changes in the brain that allow us to adapt to stress. So purpose in life is actually related to prefrontal brain function, better adaptability to changing situations, and studies show that connecting with a purpose beyond the mundane everyday life can help you reduce anxiety and aggression after stressful events. All right? So these are just a few of the things that we can do to use our strengths and talents in service to others. That could be one of the ways that you find some purpose. Studies have shown that performing a random act of kindness, which became really popular in positive psychology. That means you're doing something nice for someone without them knowing, could be a complete stranger, without even seeking any sort of recognition. So like putting coins into the parking meter of someone that you notice that their meter has expired. So what is one thing you could do today that would make this day worth living? This is what I want you to think of. So I hope this has been helpful to give you a sense of what these 10 traits of highly resilient people are. What you're going to find is that the more that you practice them, the better you become able to weather the storm of life. I will be going live again next week. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But has this been helpful to you? Yes, thank you from LSA to CKL. I'm glad to know that this has been helpful. So, and yes, I love this from LinkedIn, finding an accountability partner. That can be helpful as well. I have no choice but to feel a little joy when this little bundle of love comes running in. She likes to hang out when I meditate and, and when I go live. Uh, so one of the things that you'll hear me talking about is an upcoming resilience boot camp where we are going to go through these 10 traits of resilience, and I'll go even more into the data and the studies and give you little challenges that can help you build your resilience. Really, really good stuff. Any questions, please type in the chat. I do want to let you know about our next upcoming masterclass, which is next Thursday, and that is all about holistic healing. I am, as you've heard, an integrative physician, so I'm looking at you holistically, mind, body, soul, environment, relationships. We call it the biopsychosocial approach, and that's really what I've done from day one as my medical career started, because I was trained in Chinese medicine, which takes that sort of holistic approach. So I'm going to talk to you next week about how you can use trauma-informed therapies that run the gamut to overcome illness, including the stress-related illness or illness that has originated from trauma in life. And then coming in June, how resilient are you? Well, you will actually be able to take a quiz that will give you a detailed report of how you score on these 10 traits of resilience and how you can improve them. And then when you're ready, I hope that you will join me in June for our Resilience Boot Camp. It is a 12-week course where you will have me teaching live as well as some video modules and challenges to do in a community so that you can build up your resilience skills. Does that sound like fun? Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Can't you just imagine it? Yay! So I'm looking forward to all of that. So thank you for being here today. I hope that this was helpful to just give you a different way of looking at resilience. Yes, it's about bouncing back. Number one, you know that you are born with it. You are born with these resilience muscles. You do not have to go and get anything artificial. You just need to flex them. Follow me on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, so that you can get more of these tips. And you can also sign up for any of my free trainings, and I will keep you updated on things. Yeah, so that's it, my friends. That is our masterclass on these 10 traits of resilience. Were any of these a surprise to you? Any of those villains of negativity roaming around in your head? Let me know if there's things that you have yet to overcome, or if you have overcome them, let me know. I'd love to hear. And for those of you who've already read the top 10 traits of highly resilient people, guess what? There's going to be a second edition coming very soon. I am expanding the book to include even more goodness for you on how to build up this stress-resistant personality. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. I am so grateful for your presence here. And yes, Sandra, so glad to know that you enjoyed Stories with Soul. Just to give you a hint on something, Stories with Soul was a 6-week training to get at finding out why you had negative villains of negativity in your mind in the first place. So uprooting any stuff from the past, our experiences, traumas, whatever, adversity. Stories with Soul is evolving. And this fall, I am launching, wait for it, the Hero course. So Hero, you may have heard me talk about HERO. Those are 4 components of psychological capital. It's hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. So the Hero course is like Stories with Soul to the next level. It will include life writing to get at the programs in your subconscious mind to help you rewire your brain and reprogram your mind, to heal the trauma of the past, and to help you create an inspiring future vision. So that is coming this fall. I'm super excited because rather than it just being 6 weeks, it's 12 months. And you'll be able to recover in a community. So just wanted to let you know about the exciting stuff coming. So I hope that you will tune in and see me next week for Holistic Healing, our next masterclass. So until then, I wish you a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And remember that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love. Much love.